The Bengals are on the clock to take care of Tee Higgins, but everything in this situation revolves around one question that no one seems to have the answer to. But in this video, I'm going to do my best to answer it myself. Hi again, Bengals fans. John Sheeran of A to Z Sports Cincinnati here, and when we look back at this offseason for Cincinnati, 5-6 months into the future, there is a strong chance that the first domino to fall that put everything else into motion, it involved Tee Higgins. And I'm not saying that to insinuate that the most important priority for the Bengals this offseason is to take care of Tee Higgins. I'm saying that the Bengals have to respect the timeline and the calendar of events on the NFL calendar. Because in less than 1 week, there is a 2-week window that opens for NFL teams to place the franchise tag on any one of their players. And if the Bengals are going to do that with any one of the guys on their roster, it's going to be Tee Higgins for the second year in a row. And because that window is not only fastly approaching, but there's a finite amount of time within that window, the Bengals are running out of time to exclusively handle Tee Higgins on their own. Like, the Bengals are far from the only organization in just the world in general to use deadlines to spur action, but if the Bengals are going to make any major financial decision, there's usually going to be a deadline right next to it. And this is why March 4th matters a ton for the Bengals, because that's the last day that they could use the second franchise tag on Tee Higgins if they can't reach an extension with him. But if they don't use the tag by then, and there's no agreement for an extension in place, then the Bengals would only have a handful of days to exclusively negotiate with Higgins all by themselves before other teams can start getting involved. And that is the last thing that the Bengals would want in this situation, because if Higgins starts talking to other teams, the price for him is going to reach a place where the Bengals are not going to go. But the question that I find myself having a hard time answering right now is what that price actually looks like. And before I say anything else, do not let me influence you here. If you have a number in your head that you think the Bengals should not approach with Tee Higgins, if it gets to that point, you think that they should back out of these negotiations, let me know in the comments. I want to know your unadulterated thoughts on this. What I do know is how much the numbers in this situation has evolved in just 2 years' time, because going back to 2023, when these negotiations first started, what I was told was that Tee Higgins and David Mulugheta, his agent at the time, were given an offer so low that they just didn't even take it seriously. It was less than $20 million per year. And I get it, in negotiations, typically you offer pretty low, so you work your way towards a middle compromise, which is where you're always probably meant to be anyways. Eventually, the Bengals made an offer that was much more competitive to what the wide receiver 2 market was looking like at the time. You're talking about somewhere in the range of $21 to $22 million per year. But just like with every Bengals contract dispute, the problem wasn't necessarily average annual value, it was guaranteed structure, it was guaranteed amounts. So Higgins and Mulugheta said, no, we're not going to take this deal, we're going to wait this out. Then you fast forward to this time last year, 3 days after the franchise tag window opened, the Bengals placed the franchise tag on Tee Higgins, which basically signified that negotiations hadn't made a single inch of progress in that time. And now fast forward another year, and we're right here in the present, where Tee Higgins has a new agent, he has Jamar Chase's agent, and there's a renewed hope that this can get done. And the numbers have changed too. We're talking about a range that no longer includes 21, 22 million a year. We're talking at least 28, 27 million a year. And this is just for the Bengals. This is just them talking directly to Tee Higgins. His agent can maybe get some feelers about, hey, like, what would you offer my client if he were available? And he can get some estimates there. But as far as negotiations, like actual negotiations go, it's only the Bengals talking to Tee Higgins right now. And that gives the Bengals an advantage of, like, this is a very real offer that we're giving to you with a real number attached to it. This is not hearsay. This is what we're saying, which means they can set the market in that sense, because they are the only market that he has at the moment. And they can keep it that way by placing the franchise tag on him. But you have major analysts like Jeremy Fowler and Ben Solak of ESPN who are saying that if Tee Higgins does reach the open market, that number is going to be at the bare minimum $30 million a year. And thus we've reached the crux of this discussion. Where does that line fall if you're the Cincinnati Bengals? Do you cross into the $30 million per year neighborhood? Do you even cross into $31 or $32 million per year in order to retain your second best receiver? Because again, that is the advantage that the Bengals have working for them right now. If they are indeed using this time to negotiate with him, they can say, hey, if you want to stay with Joe and Jamar in an offense where you know and everyone else knows that you're a fit and this can work, then maybe take slightly less per year than what you would get on the open market, and everyone comes out of this happy. And all of this makes what Higgins recently said about the situation very interesting to me, because he basically said that this is all out of my control at this point. If I got to go to another team, I got to go to another team and do what's best for me. But yeah, it's out of my hands at this point. And I get what he was saying. The season is done. He can't do anything more to really raise his value. It's just up to now his agent negotiating with the team in this regard. But he also does have the power to say, hey, whatever final number the Bengals land on, I can either accept that or deny it. And I realize that some of you would probably call me a coward for not at least trying to answer the question that I proposed in this video, so I'm going to do my best to do that right now. I think the contracts that matter here in these discussions involve Devonta Smith, DJ Moore, Terry McLaurin, and Jalen Waddle. And it's not just the raw average annual value that those guys had, It's what that average annual value was relative to what the salary cap was at the time that they signed those contracts. Like Devonta Smith, he signed for $25 million per year, and that $25 million was 9.8% of what the salary cap was at the time that he signed that contract. And Terry McLaurin signed for just over $23 million per year, and at that time, that number was 11.1% of the salary cap at the time. I think whatever the Bengals propose here is going to land between 9.8% and 11.1%, or whatever the salary cap is for this year. And based off over the cap's estimate of what the salary cap is expected to be, that number is probably going to be somewhere in the range of $28 to $29 million per year. So that $30 million per year average, I do think that is where the line is drawn for the Bengals. But I really want to know, where is your line drawn in the sand here? Where would you stop with the Tee Higgins negotiations? Let me know in the comments below.